Welcome back to the PI Planning Cooking Show. If you remember last episode, we said we would cover art cadence. However, this week we have something different. I've had a great many emails and messages from people asking about my session from the European SAFE Summit in Den Haag just a few weeks ago. And so this week, because so many people have asked about it, we're going to do a special presentation of that session. So I hope you enjoy this special presentation of Take Your PI Planning to the Next Level. I hope you find it interesting and I hope you find the information in it useful. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments. We promise to get back to you as soon as we can. So, enjoy the show.
Welcome to the PI Planning Cooking Show with Shane Harrison.
So here we go. Take your PI planning to the next level, relentless improvement and innovation in PI planning. My name is Shane Harrison. I am a digital transformation strategist at Flowsphere in Switzerland, but I am from far, far away. That would be New Zealand, which you can see on the map to the top right. It's about 27 hours flying if you want to have a go, but it's a good place to go. There's hobbits and everything down there, lots of wine, lots of beaches, lots of fun, and very friendly people. Now, why am I obsessed with PI planning? I'm obsessed for this very reason here. Without effective execution, no strategy can succeed. No grand idea can be realized without effective and efficient execution. This is a great book if you get a chance to read it. But this is, for me, what SAFE is all about. It's about taking that grand vision, those great ideas that the business has, those business opportunities, or even, unfortunately, those business problems that need to be solved, and understanding them and realizing them in such a way that you now have added business value. So let's move ahead. Let's talk about what it takes. So one key element that I always share with RTs and STs as we work together is they have to look at their art and their development value stream and all the operating models and cadence models around that as if that is a product unto itself. So how you run your execution engine needs the same sort of attention as the product that you're using that execution engine, that execution capability to improve, to evolve. And so you too must improve and evolve that engine. So you have to apply the same principles, the same values to your execution engine as you would to the product itself. So that means relentless improvement, lots of relentless improvement, lots of innovation, and not just the day-to-day stuff that you get with your iteration retrospectives, but you need to apply that at your art level, and you need to apply it at your solution level. And what we're going to go through here is some of the things that we discovered over, it would be about more than 7 years now that I've been working with arts and with solutions, applying SAFE. Here are some of the things that we've learnt in that journey, some of the improvements that we've made as we went forward. The first thing we're going to look at is feature socialization. We're going to do a really brief look at that. I'm going to do a separate presentation on that later in the year to go much more depth, but it is really important to the overall PI planning itself. So I'm going to look at a particular case and some particular principles in that space. I'm also then going to look at risk visibility. What is it that derails your plans? Generally speaking, risk. Risk is the killer. Risk is the thing that causes you pain during planning. Risk is the thing that causes you pain during execution of that plan. And then I'm going to briefly go through a concept which I call walking the walls, which is a slightly different approach to operating your PI planning and doing some of the reviews that you do during PI planning. So let's look at enhanced socialization. So let's first look at what socialization is. Socialization is what you do in preparation for PI planning. PI planning is your opportunity. Socialization is a lot of your preparation. Socialization is in fact the largest part of your preparation from a team's perspective. It's the biggest part that helps them get prepared to really leverage those 2 days that you have, or maybe even longer, in the planning room. So let's look at a simple definition for socialization. The process of sharing, reviewing, and collecting feedback, revising features until a team is sure that they feel they fully understand the intent of the changes, the intent or the vision behind the features that you're asking for, what the business wants, until they feel they know enough to plan and execute against that vision, those features. That is what socialization is about. I cannot emphasize enough, it is their understanding that is important. It is not the understanding of the architects, it is not the understanding of the product owners or the Scrum Masters or the product managers. It's the team who has to plan it, it's the team who has to execute it. They must fully understand what they're being asked to do, and it's really important they understand the intent and vision behind it. Otherwise, they may solve the problem, but in a way that constrains you later on. The more they understand, the better. So, another part of socialization, other than presenting and walking through your features, which you would do in the last 1 to 2 iterations before PI planning, is socialization of everything that's going to happen at your IP iteration. Your IP iteration shouldn't be a surprise in any way, shape, or form. And the transition point that it gives you is an opportunity to switch things like people changing roles, your art structure, the number of arts, whether you're a solution or not, with the number of solutions you have. Changes within the delivery structure. Where does testing fit in? Are you going to keep all the elements that you currently have inside your system team, or are you going to split some of them out? This is the time to do that. Changes in architectural strategy, even changes in high-level product strategy. All of this should be part of socialization, because all of it is all distilled into the context in which the teams are going to execute the plan that they build during PI planning, so it all is part of the context of building that plan itself. So make sure in your socialization you include all of those elements, all of the elements that are the definition of your art or your solution. It's key because it's context, and context makes a great deal of impact on what your plan is. So as I mentioned, I'm going to do another longer presentation on socialization in a couple of weeks, but that's enough to give you context so we can move on to the next most important thing, which is risk. And before we go into the risk element, I want to talk about the triggers for the change that I'm about to walk you through. We didn't just come up with these because of our imagination. We went out and we looked and listened and talked, and we did the Gemba walk. You all know what the Gemba walk is, right? Go see for yourself and understand. We should never forget the understand. You must understand the context. You must understand the people. You must have empathy for where they are in the conversation. It is not enough to go and observe and then apply your view of the world. You must understand their view of the world when you go there. So we talked to the teams, and what I've done is that I've collected like 3 examples that we got more or less repeatedly across multiple arts and across multiple solutions and multiple customers and multiple contexts, and I just want to get you a feel for what we got, and this is sort of why socialization was still in here. We had a time constraint, so I had to thin it down, but nonetheless it's here because of this first message from the developers, this first message from those who do the work. We do not get enough time to understand the features before planning. If they do not understand the features before planning, don't bother going to planning, or double the length. Enjoy that discussion. Another thing that came from the developers, why so many sessions during PI planning? And really, when we looked at that, we thought, good point. Why are we spending almost half of the first day broadcasting information to the teams? Doesn't that mean our socialization hasn't worked? If we're having to spend that much time broadcasting things from scratch, that means your socialization hasn't worked. And to be honest, when we interviewed team members about why we don't get many questions during those broadcast sessions, the answer was simple. I'm sitting in front of 150 people or 100 people or 50 people. I am not going to ask questions and risk making myself look silly. Another reason why your socialization needs to be at team level as much as you possibly can. But let's go back to the core point here. Why so many big sessions? We're there for the teams to create a plan that delivers features, a plan that results in business outcomes, business objectives being achieved, organizational objectives being achieved. And so shouldn't we spend the majority of time planning? Yes, you should. And the basic planning framework, the basic calendar, you'll find that you're actually spending only 5 to 6 hours planning, and of the 15 hours, the rest of the time you're doing reviews or you're doing broadcast sessions. We wanted to invert that, and you'll see how we did that as we moved on. Feedback we got from Scrum Masters: when we get our teams into a state of flow when they're planning, stop interrupting us all the time. You pull me out for an SOS every hour, every 45 minutes, depending on when the day is, sometimes every 2 hours. But every time that happens, my teams get disrupted. They leave a state of flow is the best description I can give you. And we need to stop that. We need to allow the teams to get into a state of flow with planning. So the next thing we looked at is feedback from the leadership. And again, it's the same context. This is from multiple arts, multiple solutions, multiple clients, multiple situations. And these were the three of the common themes. So from the RTEs, they got tired of the teams going, yes, we knew about this. And the RTE going, well, why didn't you tell us? Well, you didn't ask. Yeah, but we asked for risks. The team responds, well, you asked for program risks, and this isn't a program risk. And so the RTEs are getting frustrated that they're getting known issues and known risks popping up during execution that were known by people within the organization, but not known to the RTEs, that could have been mitigated possibly even during PI planning, and they wanted that solved. We got a department here, in fact more than one, but I have one particular in mind because he was quite strong in his opinions on this one, who listened to his teams a lot. He was an excellent line organization leader, and his feedback was their teams were complaining that they spend too much time in broadcast sessions in planning. Sound familiar? And why don't they get more time to plan in planning? So the teams really recognize the value of PI planning. That's really important. Last of all, from a business owner, goes back to socialization to a certain extent. Teams do not seem to fully understand the features before they start. Where is the preparation? Those weren't his words, but that's the message, I think. So let's look at risk. Let's go after that big one. That one that is consuming a lot of time and creating a great deal of disruption during execution. If your RTEs, if your STEs, if your Scrum Masters and your teams are spending a lot of time dealing with unexplained or unprepared events, what do you think they're not spending time on? They're not spending time on moving the product forward. So it's not very an effective solution. So we want to improve the risk visibility. And I just want to briefly go back for a second to the same IT director I was talking about before. And I have paraphrased this for politeness purposes. Basically, expecting objectives to be delivered without a solid plan is like wishing on a star. Romantic, but not particularly practical. This is very true, and it reminds me of a situation where I was asked to have a look at a solution and have a look at some of the arts in the solution, where the business was delighted with the objectives being set, but really seriously upset with what was coming out the other side. And so I dug in, I looked inside, and I looked at the team's plans, and then I looked at the objectives, I looked at the plans. I'm thinking, these two things don't go together. If I read your plan, I should be able to see what the objectives are. But what I see is a really nicely, like we're talking Shakespeare or Goethe quality written objectives, But the objectives don't seem to represent the plan. If you look at the risks in the plan, if you look at the content of the plan, it's almost like they wrote the objectives based on what the business wanted and desired, and they wrote the plan based on what they could do. And the two just didn't connect. And that's really what this gentleman was talking about. Having these great objectives is worthless. It's lovely, but worthless if we can't actually execute. Going back to that very first quote, right? If you can't execute, your strategy is worthless. So let's go into that detail a little bit. So the goal of this first set of changes that we made to PR planning was to eliminate missed risk. I know that sounds a bit weird, but we wanted to make sure that all the risks were being brought forward, that we were managing the risks well, and that we specifically ensured and encouraged the teams to bring as much risk to the surface as possible. Every risk, any risk, bring it up. Yes, we weren't interested in surprise holidays or something like that, but what we didn't want the team to is filter the content before we were able to work out where the value was. We also wanted to identify missing assumptions because that was one of the other causes of surprises as well. And we wanted to expose issues. Well, a number of times I heard, oh, we can't do this because there is an issue with the infrastructure, the deployment servers, the test harness or something like that. Well, where is that in your plan? Oh, you didn't ask for issues. Yeah, but in the training it talks about issues. If you want somebody to do something, you need to be explicit about the outcome that you need. I need to know about all the issues you have. So here is a category called issues, and you'll see that in a moment. So here is a classic planning wall. It's a little bit simplified, but you've got your stories, you've got your enablers, you've got some risks. This is more or less what it looks like. Got your objectives. So the first step one as it were, was we broke down the risk category to a finer level of granularity. So you already have the big killer of plans, dependencies, split out. They go on the program wall. And you have those agreed between the teams. What's the number two? The number two is assumptions. We wanted to break that one out as well. Another reason for breaking out assumptions is they are something that's relatively easy to check. So if you actually break them out, you can actually go to the person and say, okay, we assume that the UI patterns for the Android client or the mobile client are not going to change this PI. I can actually go and check that relatively simply. And so having that out in the open allows us to go and check it. And another one is the introduction of the category of issues. So what are the problems we have right now? So what's the difference between a risk and issue? I get asked that every time I do this presentation. A risk is something that could happen, might happen, hopefully not. An issue is something that is happening. So an issue is that the test harness can't handle the new messaging service that we're using. So maybe it doesn't work with the type of queuing system that you're using. You may be using a RabbitMQ and your test harness doesn't work with that. That's an issue. A risk is that we're implementing a new queuing system, RabbitMQ, and there's a risk that the test harness doesn't work with it. So an issue is a known, a risk is an unknown. Another thing you see that we split out here is reservations. We did that because we wanted to make it easier for the teams to put it up there. We wanted to make it easy for it to be seen, and we didn't want to have complex conversations about it. We didn't want those complex conversations. So that's what we did, and this is what happens to the wall when you do that. So there are a few changes here, but look what you can see straight away. I can see that every iteration, but iteration 3, has 2 reservations in it. So if I'm reviewing this plan, I know there's a question straight away. I don't need to search through all the stories and figure out which ones are reservations and which ones aren't and whether they're covered or whether they're not. I mean, I'm saving like 5 minutes at least in the review here. Also, your risks, issues, and assumptions are now split out. So I can ask the team, have you validated these assumptions? So it doesn't take so long. I don't, again, have to read through all the risks and work out which ones are assumptions and which ones are risks. And of course, you have the issues, right? Issues are something that needs to be actively managed. It's a pain that's being felt every day. So when you see issues starting to appear, you should get nervous, because that means the team is in pain. There's something preventing their performance. So we can now see more. Critically, for me, I can see more without interrupting the team. The team can continue to plan without interruption, without me asking any questions, and I can see more. It allows me to have a better view of when I do need to interrupt them, what I should be talking to them about. The next thing we do, step 2, was we looked at that previous version and we thought, well, it would actually be useful to know what the impact was of each of these things. Specifically, risks and assumptions. We didn't seem to have a major problem with issues. Those were pretty actively handled anyway, and we never had a problem with knowing what the issues are. If you have that, I would really advise that you apply the same logic that we have with the risks and assumptions. But we wanted to flag which stories are going to be impacted by which risk and which assumption. Again, saving us a lot of time in the review of the plans and being able to see what's going on. So if you look here, all of a sudden we have a different view of the world, right? So you see that risk number 1 has a far greater impact than risk number 2 in the early stage of the PI. And you also can see that the assumptions are spread out, but also that they're not having that greater impact in terms of if we have problems, the ones we need to focus on are assumptions 1 and 2. But you can see where the problems are. As I said, 1 has a far greater impact. 1 is impacting 5 stories, where number 2 is only impacting 4. There's a lot of risk around iteration number 2 and a little bit of assumption there as well. In particular, you're seeing most of the risk is around business stories. There's not anything around enablers. That is all powerful. And again, I want to repeat that final point I made before. I can see this without interrupting the team at all. One of the other benefits in doing this is it's triggering the team to think about these things on a story-by-story basis. As I put the story up, what assumptions am I making about what will happen? What are the risks associated with this? Is that risk on the wall already? And of course, the issues. Are they there? The next step, which is a relatively recent one, was we were looking at the roaming process, which is very, very important, and it's critical to SAFe, but we thought, why are we waiting? We have talented, intelligent people sitting in the teams. We have brought out all of the risks, assumptions, and issues. Why don't we empower them? Why don't we help them with training or coaching if needed, handle these risks and assumptions themselves? So we thought, okay, why don't you guys have a go at identifying what things belong to you that you can handle yourself and what things we need to handle for you. Something that is beyond your control, out of your domain of control, as it were. And then, why don't you roam them? You have skilled people in there. We can train everybody on how to roam. Resolve, own, accept, mitigate. If you're not sure, can't remember what roam means. And so we got the teams to start doing that on an individual risks, issue, and assumption basis. So we got them to flag those, and they would put on them which ones they own, or which ones that they accepted, or which ones they had mitigated, and which ones they thought we should handle. And we encouraged them to suggest to us what they think we should do. Now, this may be going back a little bit far for some of you to your leading SAFe, but one of the principles of the delegation in leading SAFe is to move the decision to where the knowledge is, to where the experience is. And that's what we're trying to do here. The team has the problem. Let's see if they have an idea of how to solve it. Because we might go, okay, you want us to own it, but this is what you want to do. That's great. We'll do that. Though one thing to watch out for here, you still need to look at these during planning because it may be a low-grade risk, but let's see if it's a low-grade risk in 5 teams. That's not low-grade to the program, right? That's not low-grade to the art. That may not be low-grade to the solution. So it is important that the RT, product manager, architect, and anyone else in that leadership team, designer, has a close look at these and looking for patterns. Again, I know I'm repeating myself here, but we can see this information without disturbing the team's state of flow with planning. That is critical. And this is the result. Now we've got the improved risk profiling. What can we see? Well, as before, we can see where the risk is, where the impact is, which stories are impacted. But now we can also see which ones the team thinks it can handle itself, which ones the team thinks it needs the program or possibly even the solution support in solving, and which ones the team doesn't know what to do. Note again, we can see this. I can see this from 3 or 4 feet away without saying a single word to the team, without disturbing their work as they go through their features and plan their features and as they revise their plan themselves. We can see a lot here. It makes the reviews much faster. And there's another enhancement that we made. That is the dependency visibility. So though this isn't in the pure risk area, dependency is risk. So we made some changes here that actually made creating the program wall very fast, very simple, and surprisingly boring. After the first few program walls that I created, not created, but I participated in creating in 2012 and 2013, it was a very noisy and disruptive event as people had made assumptions about people accepting dependencies and not accepting dependencies and which sprints things were in and which they weren't. And over time, the response to that was what you see here. And basically, the only people who can sort of flag a dependency as accepted is the people who are providing it. So if I need to provide an interface or a document for another team, that team cannot put that dependency up onto the program wall until I have accepted and designated what's going to happen and when it's going to happen in the form of a contract, which is basically my team ID and a unique dependency ID. Now, that small amount of formalization, because I'm no big fan of formalization, that small amount of formalization made all of those problems around putting a program wall disappear. It was amazing how quick it happened. It was done in 15 minutes in almost silence as they put it up. The wall still was immensely and still is immensely valuable. It's just the creation just was fast and smooth and painless. Maybe the odd issue here and there, but instead of the loud, noisy, hour-long exercise that I'd seen before, it was a dream, and it was very much worth it. You no longer saw people agreeing dependencies over coffee or in a hallway. You would see them looking at each other's plans, talking about when they needed something and putting it in there. There are some tricks to handling that. We're not going to cover that in the session. We'll do another session on dependency handling during PI planning. There are a couple of different techniques for that, but we'll cover that in another session coming up. So let's look at the impact of all of these changes overall. So I'm a big believer in surveys. I'm a big believer in the anonymity of surveys. I know there are lots of issues with them because we are asking opinions. It's not necessarily facts, but I use them a lot. And we counted the amount of negative feedback that we had on PI planning, on the time lost in PI planning. Instead of 60% people going, we don't have enough to plan, we got down to 18%. It's not perfect yet, but yeah, it's not a bad drop at all. The number of exceptional risk events happening during the PI itself dropped in some cases to zero. The only events were ones we knew about. Almost overall, it was about a 90. We actually did count these, and it was about a 90% drop. That's a big deal. That means your RTE and the other people in the leadership team, product management, can focus on preparing for your next PI planning, for your next PI. They can focus on strategic change, not reacting. And it also means that when they do have to react to something, they're not having to react to a problem in a crowd of other problems. They have more room to maybe give a permanent solution or find a permanent solution than getting into a state, which I've seen before, where the objective was get this monkey off my back, not find this monkey a good, happy and healthy permanent home, which is what people will want to do. But when you got to deal with 20 monkeys on your back, you just got to move them on. And average team predictability just went crazy. Went from 82 to 94, and we saw some teams sitting at around 100 and just over 100 in every PI, to the point where we were worried that they were getting too predictable and we needed to introduce some innovation and some disruption, and which is what we do and what we did. But that's a good situation to be with. You don't want to be chasing performance. You want to be looking at how do I get my performance to the next level. And we were lucky enough that with some of the arts and some of the teams, we were able to start that journey, which is a much more fun journey than the survivability one. So now I'm going to move on to walking the walls. So as I did earlier, I just covered just enough socialization to sort of lead into the planning, and I'm going to cover just enough walking the walls so you can understand what these changes benefit you. In the previous pieces, when I talked about what you can see without interrupting the teams, that was really key to this next technique. You can use those without that, but it was really important. So with walking the walls, what we wanted to do is reduce the amount of time we interrupted the teams, preventing them from planning. So where we're really working hard to maximize the planning time, we wanted to provide higher quality support to their planning, not higher volume, not higher quantity. We wanted pure quality. So when we interrupt them, when we start talking to them, we're focusing on things that will materially move the needle in terms of the quality of the plan and the outcome of the plan and the reliability of the objectives they produce. That was really, really important. We didn't want to lose time reading 50, 60 stories to work out what they were all are in our heads. And that's a lot of the reason that we made the changes to the planning wall as well. And so by adding a few extra things to that, one of them being the SOS by walking around approach, we were able to increase the amount of support because we actually made our SOS, our Scrum of Scrums chart, a little bit more detailed. We broke it into phases and we put it on the wall and we allowed the team to manage it themselves. So we no longer dragged the Scrum Master out of the team, out of planning, to share basic progress information with us. We still pulled them out when we had key things to discuss, but the basic progress information was in the wall in front of them. Also, any team member can update it. So you don't have to wait for the Scrum Master to do it. We have the collective power of the team working on this. So the Scrum Master can focus on helping the team achieve a state of flow, stay in the state of flow. The RT and the other art leadership can still see where the team is in their planning progress. You still had sync sessions, but they were far fewer and far more focused and more valuable. We would have sync sessions when we had something really meaningful to talk about. Generally speaking, I've also been through some sessions where we've had good socialization, good preparation, and we've had 2 sync sessions over the whole 2 days, and we didn't need them, and the plans were really good. If you can get to that, that's great. But basically, the RT can walk around, see exactly what the status is with each and every team. By being able to watch them go through that process, you have a better idea of when they're stuck and how and when to intervene as well. And that's when we get to the gallery walk review. The only person in the room who doesn't need a chair is the RTE. You take everyone else can have a chair, the team can be sitting around working together. The RTE stands up at the beginning of the day as the compere launches and doesn't stop walking until the end of the day, because they should be walking from team to team, observing, listening as they go. And that's what the gallery walk is really about, is you're always walking around, and then what you can do is you can trigger a review of a team's plan at any time where you see they're stuck, where you see that they're blocked, where you see that they're not making the sort of progress they should be, or there's an issue around risks that really concerns you. You can do a plan review at any time. And so I've been in situations where I've done 3 full plan reviews with teams, not just the one that you have on the first day. We did 3, and we were able to do them at the length that the team needed. And the reason we did 3 is because the team was getting stuck on particular issues, and the review itself, by having that conversation with the architect and with the product manager, we were able to break the blockage and allow the team to continue planning. If those issues didn't get surfaced, didn't get addressed until the end of the first day, there would be 2 problems. One is at the end of the first day, let's say you've got 10 teams and you've got an hour, that's 6 minutes a team. Would you find the source of the blockage in 6 minutes? Maybe you would. I don't think I would. And to be honest, often if you have to imagine you've got one team, we have to spend 12, what do you do with the rest? So by having those draft reviews, I could spend 20 minutes with a team and then 5 minutes with another team and maybe 30 minutes with another, and not having to worry about I've got teams lining up, queuing to go through, and I can actually review the plan. Because often what I see, and I know it's in the official training, but that draft review is all about objectives. Objectives is the outcome of your strategy, your realization. It's not how you achieve the solution to the problem, it's the team's rendition of the solution. This is PI planning. This is about creating a plan that achieves objectives. It's not just about the objectives. The biggest cause of failure I've seen in delivery is just focusing on the objectives, not focusing on the plan. So you can do a full plan review and still, at the end of the first day, do an objectives review. That's fine. That works really well. But you've got to get down and dirty inside the plan. As I said, in some teams, I've spent 3 times reviewing their plans. And in the same art, I only did 1 review of the plan because they just didn't have any blockages. So that worked really well. And the impact, well, end-to-end planning time reduced by about 2 hours. We were able to almost invert. In some cases, we actually did invert the amount of time planning versus the amount of time in common sessions. We were able to grow the team planning time to 10 hours, though, to be honest, often they didn't need it. But we reduced the common sessions down to 5. So that's an increase of 100% from the 5 that you start off with. We shortened the management reviews by at least 50%, in fact, typically more than 50%, because the teams had made these changes around how the risks were done. All the risks were handled before the management got there. They only had to look at the ones that were flagged for them, and they only had to find those resolutions. And it became a very quick, and I saw management reviews in less than half an hour, because we basically had a list of things to handle and we just handled them rather than actually trying to dig in and really understand the issue. It had been well communicated. I even saw, and this truly surprised me, a distributed art which had people from New York to India, to Pune in India, complete their planning in 2 calendar days. Even with the time zone stress that they had, they were able to complete it in 2 calendar days. We had a special setup for that, but up until then we hadn't seen one of those finish in less than 3. And by working in this way, we're able to zoom through much, much faster. So I hope this has been useful for you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us here. And please subscribe to the channel, click on the bell, like us, and make comments. If there are areas that you want to have more information about or more detail, just let us know in the comments below and we'll try to get back to you as soon as we can. See you next time, where we will talk again about Art Cadence.
That's the PI Planning Cooking Show with Shane Harrison.